You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network. Are you listening to this podcast on your commute to work, on a walk to the store? Do you ever think about the strangers around you and how your life could change by saying hello? That's the premise of Lincoln Center Theater's new play, The Coast Starlight. Set aboard a long-distance train, the play examines the power of human connection and the ways in which we guess at each other's lives. As a special offer to our listeners, all tickets for the month of February are just $35. To purchase tickets for The Coast Starlight, visit telechargeoffers.com and use code COAST35. Previews begin February 16th. For more information, visit lct.org.
And I realized that if we controlled our own destiny, we could do so many more things. I went to the board of directors and my boss at Disney in 1977 when I was working licensing to these other services. And I said, we should do something called the Disney Channel. Now, at the time in 1977, it was so early, there weren't even satellites yet. You may not even know this, but how HBO and Showtime were functioning in those days, they were bicycling 16 millimeter prints around the cable systems all over the country.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Was It Chance, the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking intentional risk for your creative life. I'm Heather Vickery.
And I'm Alan Seals. This is the hand gesture we have to do. We are two perfect strangers who met by chance and embraced opportunity. Listen in as we chat with other successful people about the risks they've taken to put themselves on a path to creative success.
I think the hand gestures, as you get animated and talk, are your indicator of success. I don't know. What do you think, Jim?
Hand gestures of success? I don't know. Well, I'm Italian. Listen, I have an Italian heritage, so I know a lot about hand gestures, right? I mean, Italians can't even speak without using their hands.
Exactly.
They have the most creative hand gestures of anybody. So, especially when it comes to expletives.
That is true. That is very true.
I don't know anything about that. Alan, can you introduce our guest today?
You haven't seen the Godfather movies?
Oh, I'm teasing. I'm being sarcastic. I'm the queen of hand gestures with expletives.
So our guest today, you've heard him speaking just now, is Jimirro. He's the creator and founding president, yes, that's right, founding president of the Disney Channel and Walt Disney Home Video. And during his tenure at the helm of the Disney Channel, he was responsible for the conception, development, and launching of the fastest growing pay service in history. He's an Oscar Awards voter, which is really cool. The subject of a documentary called Jim J's Jukebox. He hosts his own lecture speaker series at the prestigious 92nd Street Y here in New York, and is the executive producer of the J2 Spotlight musical theater company, which was founded before the pandemic and is now starting its second season. So holy crap, Jim, you've had quite a little creative career here.
I mean, that is a resume, my friend.
It's been a great ride, I will tell you. And I'm just about in the middle of it now.
There you go. I love that perspective. I don't even really know where to begin because you have done it all. I think I'd like to start. This is probably pre-Disney. I don't know. You'll have to tell us. What is the first professional, unexpected chance that led you down this path?
Well, that's a difficult question. Let me frame it in a different way. You know, I was very lucky. From the time I was 7 or 8 years old, all I really wanted to do was work for CBS and live in New York. I loved my dad had taken me to New York. He wanted me to enjoy New York, and it just got under my skin. I loved the energy. I loved the theater. I loved the music. I loved everything about New York. I was a kid from Pittsburgh, by the way. And I knew I was always gravitated toward the quality institutions and wherever I went. And I knew that CBS at that time was known as the Tiffany Network. And I wanted to work for CBS because it was the best of all the networks, bar none, in every possible measurable sense. And I wanted to live in New York. And I made that happen. One day, I was living in New York, East 60th Street, between 2nd and 3rd, and I was working at CBS. The route to get to New York It's actually rather a long story, but maybe I'll try to get it in 2 or 3 minutes because you may find it interesting. I knew I wanted to work for CBS. I'm now a graduate student at Penn State University. And I said, well, how am I going to get into CBS? I had summer jobs at WFIL in Philadelphia, which is another story. So in the spring of my graduate year, working on my PhD at Penn State, I sent a letter to the president of WCAU, Jack Schneider, who's still very much with us, really good guy. And I told him I was interested in the internal communication structure of WCAU. That here's an institution which is designed to communicate outward to people, and yet you've got this internal communications, and how does that all work? And what I wanted to do was go there for an afternoon, a day, spend time with him in the morning, and then each of the department heads at WCAU during that day, promotion, sales, publicity, marketing, production, programming. And then at the end of the day, I would circle back to John Schneider. Now, I will tell you something that is absolutely unequivocal. As I walked into that station that spring day, and I think 1962, I knew, and I'm absolutely not engaged in hyperbole here because I often wonder where this came from. I wonder myself where this came from. I knew they were going to offer me a job. The reason I holded the paper there is because I wanted to get a job. I wanted it in, but I knew it was going to happen. I knew it. So I went there in the morning. I did the whole thing with each of the department heads. Met with Jack Schneider at 4:30 in the afternoon, and his first words were, "You've turned up everybody's skirt tails today." I still remember. I remember that colorful language, that metaphorical language, and they offered me a job. So that is an example of not a surprise, but I think an excellent example of making your own way, of making your own breaks, of being aggressive in being an advocate for yourself. And then another thing happened, which got me to New York. So I ended up working in the sales department of CAU. By that time, I knew a lot of people there for the summer jobs. Left Penn State without my PhD because I was getting tired of academia. And also, by the way, one of the reasons I left is because I got involved with a group named the Penn State Thespians. And I was having so much fun developing musical comedies for the college audience at Penn State that I was neglecting my PhD studies. I thought musical theater was more fun.
So, you were right. You're right. Yeah, of course.
So I was working in the sales department of CAU. At that time, CBS was a very structured company, a wonderful company, and they had like a farm program for young, bright, promising executives. And that program was you started a local station, of which there were 5 in the top 4 markets plus St. Louis, and then you would go to Chicago, and then you would go back to New York. That's how the farm system worked. And I was in that system. It was really an on-the-job training program for future executives of CBS. I didn't want to go to Chicago. I was eager to get to New York. I went to my boss, Frank Beasley, who was a good guy. And I said, Frank, I don't want to go to Chicago. Can you set me up with somebody at CBS in New York? And at the time, there was a guy named Cliff Benfield. He was director of management resources. His job was to find bright people in the organization and make sure they were properly developed. Frank, again, really a magnanimous guy, set me up with Cliff Benfield. I went up to New York to meet with Cliff, and he said, got something for you. Go see Willard Block. I didn't care what Willard Block did. It really didn't. Willard Block was a vice president of CBS. If I could work for anybody, it didn't matter to me whether it was promotion or program. I just wanted to be. And this relates, by the way, to my interest in communications. I love anything that has to do with communications. Part of which is theater. I love interpersonal communications, public speaking, marketing. I mean, anything that has to do with one person or group of people talking to another. So anyway, he said, go see Willard Block on the 23rd floor. I found a directory at CBS because I love Willard Block. He was the vice president of international sales. And oh my God, CBS and international. So I went up there and I met Willard Block, and he offered me a job. And now I was the second in command at the international division at CBS. I had gone to New York, bypassing Chicago, and I was doing exactly what I wanted to do from the time I was a kid in Pittsburgh, working at CBS and living in New York City. So in both of those instances, I did make my own breaks, and I will say that. And then the reason I'm willing to discuss that so much, not discuss it, but tell you about it so much, is because I wonder. I always wonder where that came from, and it makes
Yes.
me
Yes.
it makes me very empathic with young people who don't have that. If they don't have that ingrained sense of absolute, fundamental, almost irrational confidence, then how can they really get ahead in a highly competitive world? It troubles me very much in their behalf. But somehow I got lucky. I had it. It is not explainable, I don't think. And there it was. So that's what happened, and that's the two ways that I illustrate the importance of taking your life in your hands, and bending the world to the extent that you can, to your own aims.
Jim, I love that. That is exactly what this show is about. So that's the question, right? Like manifestation. It isn't just a thing you think and then it happens. It's a thing you decide and then you behave in a certain way to make it happen. We create our own chance, and asking and leaning into those opportunities. I love your energy, and I love how you said I just knew, and that's a space that I work really hard to be in, is trusting the thing that I know about the end result and not how I'm going to get there. We're just going to fucking get there. It's going to happen because I've decided it's going to happen, and I'm not going to give up until it happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such a key thing. As I say, it does make me wonder about people that don't have it, because it is a tough world out there, and frankly, I still have that in me. But part of what happened to me is also, I have to admit, is a function of youth. There's something invincible about how you can feel as a youth. I think you inevitably get maybe just a little more cautious as you get older. You don't lose that entirely, but there's no doubt that having that inside me, coupled with youthful vigor and maybe even a little naivete, fine, that works well when you're in your early 20s. Works brilliantly.
Yeah, sure
So
does.
how old were you then when you became second in command of International Space Station relations?
That was even before we had cyberspace. I was at 27.
Wow.
Yeah.
God, I was still working at Busch Gardens as a $13 an hour performer when I was 27.
And the interesting thing about that, Al, is there I was traveling around the world. So I have become literally a world citizen because of my international travels for CBS and later for Disney. So that I have friends all over the world. I'm familiar with the world, because I was in that job. I was traveling 7 to 8 months a year out of the country. So I became quite familiar. And by the way, it's also interesting, and just a sidelight, when I started traveling internationally, which was 1968, Europe still had a lot of old world in it. I feel sorry for people today, in the sense that when you go to Europe, it's becoming more, it's the global, right? I mean, there's still a lot of things you can find, but I remember the old hotels and the old restaurants and the feeling, because that was only 23 years after the end of the war, so it was still fairly young compared to today. So I came in at the tail end of what some people might call the old world. I think having had a chance to experience that really has been wonderful for me. And my wife and I still do a lot of international traveling, and that makes us happy.
Oh, I love to travel, and I love to international travel. Jim, I'm curious, how much of this mindset that it sounds like you've always had, do you think was passed down from your parents? Like, how important is that in having the confidence to go out and create your dreams?
Inherited confidence.
I think a lot. I can tell you one quick story about my dad, because my dad. I was raised in a town called Monongahela, Pennsylvania, which is a mill town. And what people did when they were, and my dad was a first generation. My grandparents came from Italy. My dad was expected to graduate from high school in Monongahela and go to work in the local foundry, which was a good job. It was a blue collar job, but it was a good job. You could make a lot of money. You got dirty. You used your muscles, but you could make a lot of money, and that was a secure way to make a living. Most people in those days in Monongahela, went to work at that place. It was called Conshohocken. And my dad went to work there. And somehow, and I have a lament I'm going to tell you at the end of this story. He decided to wait for the lament. He decided to become a life insurance agent for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. Now, I always think about that. At the time, my dad probably had one suit, and he was, if any, and he was in this blue collar world, and he left that, all of that security and all of that expectation, and became a white collar worker for Metropolitan Life. Ended up becoming a pretty high level executive at Metropolitan Life, and really changed his destiny and his life and mine in the process. The lament I have, and it really bothers me, is I never explored with my dad how he did that. What was he feeling when his sisters and his brothers and all of the people he knew were back in Monongahela? What motivated him to move out and do that? Where did that come from? Was he scared? And my mother, I would ask her the same thing, because I know, of course, she was ultimately, the supportive person, and she was with it all the way. But anyway, he did that. And I'm always glad to talk about my dad and mother, because the one thing I want to make clear is no matter what we say about any accomplishments I've had in my life, none of it would have happened without them. So we need to make that clear.
Of course,
absolutely. I mean, we can't. One of my favorite lines from Trevor Noah's memoir is, "People cannot dream of things they've never imagined." And you saw your dad create something that was so out of the realm of possibility. And whether or not you got to discuss it, you saw it. So all of a sudden, your ability as a child to believe in being a creator of unrealistic dreams, and then your resume, which I know Alan is dying to dig into, I am too, which speaks to being a creator of unrealistic dreams and making them realistic.
Yeah.
Your whole career.
What about Disney then? Speaking of resume, because you're doing International Journey to Mars at CBS, and then you go and you decide, I'm going to start the Disney Channel. I mean, so was this a chance that you then embraced on your own, or did you purposely say, there's an opportunity at this company, I'm going to go do this thing?
No, I got to Disney before I started the Disney Channel. So by this time I'm running the international division at CBS, and I get a call from a guy named Rich Irvine, the best boss I ever had, who's still very much with us. And he said, to make a long story short, "Hey Jim, we need somebody to run the international division at Disney. Would you join? The industry thing, international sales of entertainment product."
Adds to the moon of Jupiter and Titan and all that. Yeah.
That's right. By the way, when I talk about my international career, I'm going to start using celestial metaphors. I remember that. I'm going to put on Sinatra doing "Fly Me to the Moon," make you happy.
There's some Uranus jokes in there that we won't talk about.
Oh my goodness. We can't take you out in public, Alan. We just can't.
That's why we're recording at home. Anyway, go on, Jim. Go ahead.
And obviously my answer to Rich was no. Why? Because all my life I wanted to work for CBS and live in New York. Why would I leave CBS and leave New York? No. Rich Irvine is a very persistent person. Every Friday we call him upping the offer. So finally he said, "Jim, you only have to give up half of it." We'll set the international department in those days was headquartered in Europe, right? More than Asia. Asia today has become more important. So he said, "Look, Europe is our big market. We leave CBS, but you don't have to leave New York. We'll set up the whole international division in New York for you."
Wow.
Wow.
So I said, okay, I can give up one of those, if not the other. So I left CBS, moved from 6th Avenue to 477 Madison Avenue above a Lamston's, and I set the international division up for Disney in New York. 8 months later, Rich Irvine resigned from Disney to become the first president of Rolling Stone magazine. John Winter had never had a president until that time. And Rich went up to San Francisco, one of the really bad career moves for him, as it turned out. But but a good one for me. And they offered me Rich's job. This is. I am now at Disney for 8 months in New York. Didn't even know many people out there, and they offered me a job to run, a major division at Disney.
How old were you?
31, something like that.
That's so
31.
incredible.
31.
Holy shit.
Wow.
Sorry to interrupt. I just had to know because it's amazing.
So at that point, I said, there are so many more qualified people to do these jobs than there are jobs. You got up that pyramid. So I'm being offered an opportunity that may never come again just because of timing. And if I give up that for New York City, I'd already given up CBS, maybe I'm going to be sorry. So I left New York. So by that time I was employed by Disney, and I went out and run this division at Disney. That was
So you moved to Europe?
No, I moved to Burbank, California.
Yeah, you said the division's in. Okay, never mind. Okay, moved to Burbank. Sorry, it was in 19 what? I cut you off.
73.
1973.
Yeah. So 74. I joined Disney in 73 in New York, and then in the summer, early spring of 74, I'm now living in Burbank and running a division at Disney. That was the best career move I could have ever made in my life. A lot of people say things always turn out for the best. That, by the way, is nonsense. There's absolutely no way to know whether things have turned out for the best. It's impossible. You can only know they turned out great, right? You can't know what would have happened.
Oh, right, because you don't know the other options.
Yeah, you don't know.
But, you're not a multiverse expert.
No, that's right. No.
I love that.
There are two reasons why it was the best career move I could have ever made. One, the Disney culture was absolutely perfect for me. It was yet another high quality company was filled with people that I could completely relate to. High integrity, honest, purposeful, relatively fewer games than you have at many other corporations. Always games, of course, but relatively fewer. And just a whole ethic, ethos, culture that would work for my temperament. Secondly, the company was grossly undermanaged. Walt Disney had died in 1966. When I got to Burbank in 74, he had only been dead for 8 years. People were atrophied. Walt had never had a succession plan. He had never talked about anything, but people who worked at Disney were in service to him. So that people weren't motivated. They weren't paid to come up with ideas, to be innovative, to do anything out of the box. They were paid to support him and his dreams. When you're a genius like Walt Disney, you're probably likely to surround yourself with people like that. I didn't have that burden. I was a young kid out in New York City. I didn't know Walt. And so I was able to step into a massive management void and make a lot of things happen. So it turned out to be, we don't know things turn out for the best. I can't imagine a better route.
Yeah.
That's how that happened. Yeah.
What I love so much about that, and for folks who are listening, we suspect our listeners, A, just think we're hilarious and they love meeting cool people like you. But B,
like we just know through no market research at all that they think we're hilarious.
But also that they're looking for insight as they also try and do this work to manifest their own creative success. And you had to make the decision, Jim, to give up something that had been your lifelong dream to move to California. You had to give up New York, which had been such an important part of where you wanted to be. And, we don't have to get into why you made that decision, but I just want people to hear it, right? Like sometimes we have to let go of something really good to embrace something really great.
Yep.
Did you struggle with that decision a lot? I mean, obviously you said no originally because you didn't want to leave New York and CBS. Then you left just CBS, stayed in New York, and then it was kind of like peeling back the layers of the onion of resistance.
Yeah,
right.
So Rich made it easy for me in a way because so the first decision I only had to give up half of my dream.
Yeah.
CBS, but not New York. So that made it a little easier. And then the second decision is what I said. And that opportunity was so extraordinary that I would have been a damn fool. See, swear just like you.
I like it.
You like it
I
better?
knew you were our people, Jim.
I would have been damn fool not to take it. So it became a little bit easier. However, uh, once I moved to California, I was missing New York so much that I bought a place in New York. So
Yes.
and then I want to make it very clear that I left my heart in New York. I left my soul in New York. I still feel about New York the way I've always felt about New York. I consider myself bi-coastal. So in one sense, I haven't had to completely give up New York.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
I still love that city. I mean, I presume you both live in New York.
I'm in Chicago, actually, after all that trash talk about Chicago of yours. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I don't want to move to Chicago. That might have been
That's all right. I love Chicago, but I also love New York.
Are you listening to this podcast on your commute to work, on a walk to the store? Do you ever think about the strangers around you and how your life could change by saying hello? That's the premise of Lincoln Center Theater's new play, The Coast Starlight. Set aboard a long-distance train, the play examines the power of human connection and the ways in which we guess at each other's lives. As a special offer to our listeners, all tickets for the month of February are just $35. To purchase tickets for The Coast Starlight, visit telechargeoffers.com and use code COAST35. Previews begin February 16th. For more information, visit lct.org.
23-year-old Walt Mendez finally got his dream job, working in show business. The only problem is his new boss, a low-level talent agent with rageaholic tendencies.
You're a nice person, Walt. That's going to be a problem. So listen, whatever your impulse is, do the opposite.
When she has a heart attack on his first day, leaving him alone, clueless and in charge, he discovers some questionable financial dealings, led by her dentist husband.
I'm literally doing root canals on anything with insurance.
And he turns to his ruthless predecessor for advice.
Walt, grow a pair. You're in the Hunger Games.
Soon, his shady ex-boyfriend resurfaces, coming on strong and making the job suddenly more attractive.
Am I making you nervous?
A little.
And it's turning you on, isn't it?
All heard through his headset at the office, Rolling Calls is a hilarious dark comedy starring Julie Halston, Richard Kind, Dan Rosales, Matt Doyle, Wesley Taylor, Luis Miranda, Aaron Davey, Brittany Mack, Andrea Macassette, and more. Get ready for Rolling Calls at bpn.fm/Rolling Calls or everywhere you listen to podcasts.
Jim, take us down this path. I mean, creating the freaking Disney home video, like, I can't think of a more brilliant business idea from any business ever in the history of all times than this.
So technologically, so 79 to 85, you were the president of Walt Disney Home Video. So VHS and the VHS beta war was basically coming to a close around 79, 80, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm remembering correctly?
Well, I think I'm trying to remember the exact dates. I think by 79, VHS had pretty much won that battle, and beta was to the trash bins. Yeah.
We had beta videos. I remember that.
Because
beta was a better system. JVC had better marketing. Beta actually was a better system, as it turns out.
That's fascinating.
You know what I heard was whatever porn does, that's where the industry goes.
Oh, yeah.
So porn released on VHS, and that's what took it that way.
Porn started this whole thing. There's no two ways about it.
So we can thank porn for Walt Disney Home Video. Got it. Cool. All right.
No, that's literally. I mean, you're laughing, and you should, but that's literally true. That's literally true. I mean.
Wow.
Porn to the comfort and solitude of your own home. I mean, come on.
You're at Disney. You're this wonderful executive there. And of course, you come in this great guy who wasn't beholden to Walt Disney or the legacy that is, or working for him directly. Was it hard to convince, like your whole career is making things happen, of just looking at it and being like, I'm going to do this, and then just not stopping. And so at what point are you looking down the path of your job, your role here, and you're saying, oh, there's opportunity here. Let's make a whole cable channel, put it behind a paywall, which has never been done before, and send it out to the nation. And then And then, like, was home video part of this, or was that a separate sort of endeavor?
So I'm now running a division, part of which is to license our movies to HBO and Showtime and other pay services. We license our movies in the secondary market that include schools and churches and clubs and prisons and pay television services. So I'm doing this in 75, 76, and I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm looking at what Disney means to the HBO service and the Showtime service. Our numbers were just through the roof. And I looked at the economics of pay television for a very different economic configuration than broadcast television. That was new phenomenon at the time, right? I'm looking at that economic, because I don't think Disney could have ever had a commercial channel to compete with CBS, by the way, if they'd gone that way. But the economics were such that we could do our own thing. Now, when you license your movies to HBO and Showtime, one thing you got to know about that is it's completely risk-free. You don't have any investment because the movies are already there. You don't have any marketing thing. You just collect the license fee and put it in the bank. But the take is relatively limited. And I realized that if we controlled our own destiny, we could do so many more things. I went to the board of directors and my boss at Disney in 1977 when I was working licensing to these other services. And I said, we should do something called the Disney Channel. Now, at the time, in 1977, it was so early, there weren't even satellites yet. You may not even know this, but how HBO and Showtime were functioning in those days, they were bicycling 16 millimeter prints around the cable systems all over the country.
What?
What? Yeah, that was before satellite, right before satellite. So I was talking about a relatively small service that would grow with the industry. In 1977, they turned me down because of the reasons I discussed earlier. They were trying to figure out what Epcot was. That was a big problem for them because Walt had dreamed about this Epcot project in Florida. He didn't really have time to define it carefully before he died in '66. They opened Walt Disney World in 1971, and they woke up after a year later, when Walt Disney World was successful, and said, gee, what in the hell did Walt mean by Epcot, experimental prototype community of tomorrow? They literally couldn't get their heads around that, but they wanted to. They wanted to make Walt's last dream, which was Epcot, no doubt, come true. So they were focused on that. They were scared of, as I told you before, they loved that easy money, the risk-free money that came in from licensing our product to other distribution arms, and they turned me down. And they turned me down for 5 years. So 77 through 82, 5 years. So now, by coincidence, in 78, I start Walt Disney Home Video, and that, of course, takes off like a shot because the whole industry did. And during that 5-year period, when we were just booming in home video, actually exceeding the revenue of theatrical, we've been in theatrical since 1934, and now all of a sudden, within a couple of years, home video is a bigger business. But during that whole 5-year period, I would come back to Card Walker. I'd say, Card, look at these numbers, and I'd show them more numbers, and I'd do more information, and I'd say, we should be doing our own thing, and then I'd go back and run my home video business, and I'd come back to Card every once in a while. And finally, after 5 years, in August of 1982, they said, okay, you can do the Disney Channel. And at that time, the price of entry had gone up dramatically from an
they missed.
They missed. I remember in those days handing a guy a check for $19 million. I still remember. I have a picture for the 2 satellite transponders, the new Galaxy satellite we had to get on, $19 million. So, so the price of entry had gone up from like $1.98, which is what I was proposing in 1977, to $100 million, which, as turns out, was peanuts because it became such a cash cow so fast that that return on investment was just fine.
Wow.
So I think I always had a good balance between not being too much of a pest, because I had work to do anyway, and keeping at it. So basically, I ended up prevailing, but it took five long years to do it. And by the way, so that was August of '82. We launched the Disney Channel in April 18th of 1983. So we were right on time except for 1 week. We had scheduled it for April 11th, and we woke up one day and realized the Academy Awards, which were later in those days, were actually on April 11th. That was a Monday in 1983. And so we moved it 1 week to the 18th because we didn't want to compete with the Academy Awards on our opening day. We launched at 4 o'clock in the morning, LA time. The rest is history.
I bet they're awfully grateful that you made that move.
Yeah, well, I think they are. And the irony of life is how fast it changes, right? So there was this massive move. And by the way, the Disney Channel not only made a tremendous amount of money, but as you can imagine, it was a tremendous marketing tool for Disney.
Sure.
We could do Epcot shows, and we could promote new move. I mean, and Disney is the world headquarters for synergistic marketing, right? I mean, they're just geniuses. When you work at Disney, there's this wonderful saying that they have is what you do is supported by, it supports everything else. And that makes all the sense in the world because the Disney customer doesn't discriminate much between the Disney Channel, a Disney movie, Disney merchandise, Walt Disney World, Disney, whatever. I love Disney, I love Mickey Mouse, I'll take it wherever and however I can get it. So the Disney Channel was a particularly strong promotional tool for Disney. The irony of which I was speaking a minute ago was that all that revolution that we created in the early 80s and in the late 70s with home video has been eclipsed by streaming all of a sudden, so the more things change, the more they stay the same,
That's one of my questions was to ask you if you feel like you paved the way for Netflix and Hulu and the streaming companies of today, right? Because we got this culture ingrained in our heads that we can get things instantly, and instantly back in the early 80s was getting a VHS tape at home.
I don't think so, Ellen. I think who pays the way are the hardware people. Us software guys, and I'm happy to be a software guy. We follow the technology. So that if Sony creates Betamax and JVC creates VHS, and then they create a system where it can happen, then we're happy to put our stuff on that system. And we didn't create the satellites. Somebody else did that. So I think we're always following the hardware, and I love that. I mean, I love that innovation, how people can take advantage, like Amazon takes advantage of all kinds of hardware. I was talking this morning about just being able to track packages. Amazon didn't invent that, but they figured out how to use it to a fairly well. So I think that we're beholden to this, and that's why we had good relationships. I mean, when you work in Disney, you're always talking to the technical guys, the guys who are creating the technology to see where they're going, what's happening. And so that's how it worked. And here's something I find interesting, by the way. When you have a new distribution system, you have a hardware software problem. That is, when you create LPs, anybody remember LPs?
Yeah.
Records.
Yeah.
So you create long-playing records. You got a problem here because nobody's going to buy an LP. Nobody's going to put their material on LP and there are no players out there.
You need players to play the LP.
Yeah. And why would anybody buy a player if there's no LPs out there? So how do you solve this problem? And the audio business has always been able to solve it. They solved it with 45s, with 78s, with LPs, with CDs. The video business never solved the hardware software problem. So every time we try to create a distribution system where people could get this in their home, we never figured out how to get the hardware and the software out there at the same time. So it never worked. It never worked until the Japanese, speaking of technology being in the lead, created a way to home tape. So when VHS came out and Beta came out, it had nothing to do with Disney and Universal and pre-recorded software. Nothing. It had to do with time shift, only time shift. So that people would buy these, not because they could go to the store and buy a pre-recorded video with Mickey Mouse on it. They bought it so they could tape the show and watch it whenever they want to. So that's what that was all about. Then,
Absolutely.
1 year or year and a half later, we wake up, the geniuses in the software business, and say, hey, wait a minute, you have an installed base of 2 million VHS players out there. That's a market. And then we followed. So if it weren't for that recording capability, I don't know what would have happened.
That's fascinating.
It really
I love that
is.
hardware software. It's called chicken and egg. It's fascinating.
It really is. Okay, so shifting gears just a little, Jim, you are a voting member of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, the Oscars. I think that is very, very cool. How did that come about, and what's that like?
You have to be invited to join. You have to be sponsored by 2 or 3 different people. But by I think I joined it in 1982. I'm not sure. I was fairly well known. It's a small industry like anything else, and I had 3 or 4 sponsors, and I was invited to join, and I did. So I've been a member of the Academy for almost 40 years.
Wow.
But it's become a little bit easier to get in that because of their efforts for diversity has enabled them, has encouraged them to get more people into the fold faster. So I guess they were feeling some pressure about that, but it's fun, and I think the future is probably a little bit challenging. They get 80% of their money from the TV show, and that's been been done poorly in the ratings recently. So there are challenges afoot.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, all award shows. I mean, the Golden Globes just happened, and I was like, "What?"
I didn't even know. I literally didn't even know until I saw the news the next day, which means there's a marketing issue too. So
yeah, well, they didn't have any TV, of course, so they just 500 people in a room at the Beverly Hilton Hotel doing having a dinner, and giving out statues. I mean, who cares? The whole thing is about TV, and so yeah, I don't know whether Golden Globes may have a problematical future, to say the least.
Let's switch gears real quick to make sure that we give this the time that it deserves. The J2 Spotlight Musical Theater Company, you're the executive producer, and you've co-founded with Rob Schneider, who's another podcaster, colleague of mine, great guy. And on your board of directors is little names like Randy Graff and LaShans and Donna McKechnie and this up and coming guy, Stephen Schwartz. I don't know if Heather, you've ever heard of Stephen Schwartz. But where, good God, why, out of everything that you're doing, you started your own public company, so J2 Communications in 1991. Is it related to that? Because side note, and we're going to come back to this, J2 Communications also acquired the National Lampoon franchise. So we'll touch on that. But yeah, in 91. So J2, the theater company, what is this? And you're about to start or have started your second season, right? So let's cover all this.
Well, I don't know whether I have the words to express the passion I've had through my life for musical theater. I don't know where it came from, but I love it, and I've seen everything, and I would live through the golden age. One of the golden ages was the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I was living in New York, and I just love musical theater. I always wish I could do something. I went to Studio 54 to see a 50th anniversary stage reading of The Happy Time. Anybody remember The Happy Time?
No.
It was a Candor and Ebb show. It was really, really nice. Starring Robert Goulet at that time. And it was 50, it would have been about 53 years ago now. And I liked it very much. I had seen the original cast. I saw everything in those days, everything. Even when I moved to Los Angeles in 1974, I was back in New York often enough. Well, I was at Penn State. I would drive to New York to see musical theater. Then I worked in Philadelphia. I would drive to New York. I mean, and straight dramatic dramas as well, but musical theater. So anyway, I love this. A friend of mine. Do you know Jimirro?
I've heard the name.
Yeah, he's an actor around town, and I got to know him on the cruise ships. And I called Jim and I said, Jim, who did that? That was really terrific. And he said, a guy named Rob Schneider. So I called Rob, and I said, Rob, I introduced myself and invited him to lunch, and he recommended the Applejack Diner at 55th and Broadway. And by the way, Rob loves diners, and Rob and I have lunch frequently, and we never go any place but a diner.
I love that.
That's our fear. We're not going to Michael's restaurant. And we obviously had a lot to talk about, right? When people love something concurrently with each other, they talk about it, and we've had a handshake at the end of that. So we founded this company. Rob has obviously been just terrific, just the greatest partner you could have. He's a remarkable guy, and we did our first season in 2020, which I think when I met Rob, it was probably the spring of 19. So we got it up pretty fast and did our first season in 2020. We do 9 performances each show, 1 dress rehearsal and 8 performances. I've seen every one of those for each of our 2 shows. Because why I'm doing this is because I want to be around people singing musical comedy songs. That's why I'm doing this. I want to be around it.
I love that.
Do it because
it brings you joy.
I cherish this. I mean, we were in the auditions in New York last week, went back for them. And I just being in that room and watching these people being so wonderful with this great material, one of which is a play by Stephen Schwartz, speaking of the guy to whom you earlier referred.
That little guy, yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of 2 people who had 3 musical shows simultaneously on Broadway.
So I guess the manifestation of creating now your own theater company, because going back to the very beginning of our conversation, you were like, I love theater. I love musical theater. And it like you were saying, it guided you through where you are and into the entertainment world and everything. And then you didn't want to leave New York, and then have found a way, created your own success to make your way back here while still, are you still working in LA? Are you ever going to stop working for doing things out there? Or are you like more of you're saying bi-coastal now, but are you trying to transition less into work mode and more into leisure mode?
I'm in 2 things, Alan. One is this musical theater project with Rob. And then the second thing, I'm interested in the role of media in public affairs. I'm interested in how media influences people, how it gets them to change their mind about who to vote for, what to buy, what to think.
Yes.
And that has been a lifelong obsession with mine, so much so that when I got my master's degree at Syracuse University, I actually wrote my graduate paper on proving through a certain experimentation process how people are influenced by the media. And I was able to do that in a controlled environment. I was able to demonstrate in a controlled environment that people read something in the paper or hear something on TV, that their minds will change. And I proved that through a controlled experiment. So that's how long my interest in this goes back. I think it's becoming even more important these days with social media and so forth. So I'm involved in that. I have a professorship at Penn State that I've endowed, which is the professorship for media effects. I have a program at the Paley Center in New York where we do an annual presentation on the role of media in society. That's become quite successful. And I'm working with other groups in Washington, D.C. that study this. So those are my 2 passions. And then the other one is lecturing on the Great American Songbook and Broadway. So with all of that and the travel we like to do, it is a busy, exciting.
You're busy. Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of New York, you mentioned something which is very true. When I decided to do this project, I didn't want to do it in Los Angeles. There's a lot of talent in Los Angeles, needless to say, a lot of good musical theater out here. But I wanted to be back in New York. I wanted to be right where we are, on West 42nd Street. I wanted to do it in New York. I had never been involved with the creative community as directly as I have been in this project. And I am, to this moment, still overwhelmed with the amount of creative talent there is in New York, that closed community where people just stroll over to 42nd Street for the auditions. And I cherish being around these people. They make me cry, even at the auditions. There's a lot of criable moments in Baker's Wife by Stephen Sondheim, by the way.
I love that.
So being around these people has been a real revelation for me and a joy. And the other thing that's done is I develop a certain melancholy about it. There's a wonderful song by a guy named Billy Barnes called "Have I Stayed Too Long at the Fair?" You can look it up. It's an amazing song about people that came to New York. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. But there's another side to that. But there's another side to that. The other side to that is, what if you don't make it there, and you have to go back to Des Moines, or you have to go back to something that you're not interested in. And by the way, a lot of people, especially in the show business, don't make it there. So there's
Most
a
don't.
yeah, most by definition, exactly, most. So there's a melancholy. So when I sit in that audition room, as I did a week ago, and I see these people who work so hard and who have so much talent, and I recognize, just as you said, that most of them are not going to make it. They're going to end up, living somewhere else, doing something else, and I find a certain melancholy about that, which really touches me. It really touches me. It makes me completely understand what Michael Bennett was going through when he did A Chorus Line, trying to tell the stories of these people, in this case dancers, who are trying to make it, who want it so badly, most of whom are going to get rejected. So it's a poignant experience for me, all of it.
Yeah. I have this every time, this emotional reaction to a curtain call, whether it's theater or live music, when the artist has come out and they are bowing, I cry every time because I imagine myself being them and how they must feel. And I don't think you ever get tired of it. I don't think you're ever like, oh, I got to go do that again. Like, you have done this thing that you are so passionate about, and this audience of people have received it and they love it. And it never ceases to make me cry.
No, I can understand that. And do you think you're also crying at human achievement that you've seen?
Yeah, for sure.
You've yet again seen human beings achieve great things, which is really
absolutely
great, wonderful.
Jim, how do you translate that into your success when you look back at everything that you've done and everything that you've started and created, and this legacy that is now exists? Like Disney would only be half of what it is without the Disney Channel, and like it's so influential to even translating back into musical theater, because people watch these Disney animated musicals and decide they love to sing or they want to dance and they want to get into performing. And so it's feeding its own destiny. But for you, how do you look back if you're not on stage taking the applause from 2,000 people? How do you look back and celebrate your success? How do you feel like you've accomplished success?
Well, at Disney, I love business. And one of the reasons I love business because you have accountability, if you're not in business, you say, oh, that was a great meeting. Well, it was only a great meeting if you achieve your goals. So I was, one person called me very declarative. When we started the Disney Channel on April 18th, 1983, we had tons and tons and tons of numbers, as you can imagine. Our prognosis was that we would break even in 2 years at 2 million subscribers. That would have been April of 85 at 2 million subscribers. So that was very declarative. We made that clear to everybody, the financial community. Obviously, the financial community is very interested in the Disney Channel and how it's going to affect the bottom line of Disney. Yeah. So we actually achieved profitability in January of 85, 4 months early, with a 1,800,000 subscribers.
That's
so
amazing.
We exceeded that. So that was an easy measure because it was quantitative. I mean, no matter how much you think, oh, this channel is great, I love this program, or we're having a good time. No, I mean, it's the bottom line, and I do love that accountability, and I worry about that. One of the reasons I don't like government so much is they never have any accountability. But that's another story. If you ever talk about how I feel about government, we talk about that. But I love the accountability. As far as J2 Spotlight is concerned, I think you both know that we're not doing this to make any money, because that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen under any circumstances. It's impossible to make any money with this. A lot of people, well, you got to. No, you can't. It's the number. It's just can't.
Broadway's not making money right now. We're in the middle of Broadway doing a second shutdown.
Yeah, I know. Scary.
Yeah.
So the joy there is less quantitative. I'd like to make as much money as we can to offset some of the expenses, but that's not what it's all about. It's really about doing a show that you can be proud of,
Yeah.
And we did that. We did 3 shows, only 2 of which got mounted because of COVID. And I was proud of all of them. They were wonderful. And we did exactly what we were going to do. And I got a chance to see them. I got free seats, This is an interesting thing about, you talked about my relationship, my dad. I had a grandmother who was a librarian at the same library for 50 years in a small town called Donora, Pennsylvania. And she never made a lot of money and she didn't care. I remember my dad saying to her, Ruth, why do you do that? I don't pay you any money. And she said, well, I get to read the books first. And
I love that answer. Yeah. I love that answer.
Yeah. And I realized that's me because I get to see these shows. And I mean it. Sitting in those auditions last week and watching one person after another do these incredible scenes Rob had extracted for the tryouts from the two shows, was just a joy. It was an absolute joy.
Hello, attractive and discerning podcast listener. Have you lost weight? I'm Tom Allen Robbins, creator and writer of Twits in Love, a steampunk distraction. It's a radio comedy here on the Broadway Podcast Network.
And I'm Michael Urie, also known as Cyril Chippington Smythe, your favorite boob and the star of Twits.
We're here to tell you that in addition to being a podcast, Twits in Love is now available as a real live hold-in-your-hands book on Amazon.
Or e-reader.
Yes, you can get it on a Kindle.
Kindle.
But you can also listen to it here on the Broadway Podcast Network, performed by an unbelievable cast.
Aw, shucks. Join me and a slew of amazing actors like Christian Borle, Mary Testa, Dakin Matthews, Kira Allen, James Monroe Iglehart, Lilias White, and Anne Harada in a story about the world's richest man, Cyril Chippington Smythe, his steam-powered valet Bentley, and his chinless cousin Binky, as they navigate a dystopian world in search of love and meaning.
Listen to Twits in Love, available now everywhere you find podcasts, and make sure to learn more about getting the book by visiting bpn.fm/twits.
Wait, where do I go?
bpn.fm/twits, you boob. Yes. Or you can go to twitschronicles.com.
Gotcha.
How do you find your ideal creativity? Where do you sit in your mind, or do you do a sort of a metaphysical practice? Do you meditate? Where do you go emotionally to find yourself at your most creative spot?
I really have trouble. I don't know, Alan. I think mainly it's instinct. I was married to a singer before my present wonderful wife, who passed away of breast cancer in 1995. She was a singer, wonderful singer. Her name was Jody Donovan, and she was going to do a new song. She was going to do "Getting to Know You," which is a song from The King and I. And I was working in those days. I didn't see her practicing that and all that kind of thing. Okay, but all of a sudden, I came home. She said, "Let me show this to you." She said, and she sang this song. And it was like amazing. It's just amazing. I didn't see any spark there. I just saw something instinctive. I saw something instinctive. So I don't really have a good question. And
what role do you think passion plays in that, though?
Oh, huge. Yeah. Massive. I think that passion and hard work, probably, without me giving any more thought to this, are probably the two most important things that are maybe indispensable. I've never known a key executive in my life who didn't work hard. I've known some key executives who were dumb. And some who were smart. Some who were correct, but I never knew one who didn't work hard. Never.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've all known some dumb leaders, speaking of politics, but going back to J2 Communications, that I teased this a while ago, that in 91, I think you acquired the National Lampoon name and spearheaded the effort to successfully turn the company around. Of course, it's a legendary brand. Where I guess in 91, right, you're still at Disney, but then you're also...
I started my own company called J2 Communications.
Right.
And I got an offer to do that. I kept getting calls in the late 80s saying that there was more money around looking for management than there was management. Would you like to start your own company? I mean, that was what was going on. We weren't really a capitalistic society. So that's what I did. And then we were successful. And then so we bought the National Lampoon, which had lost money for 10 straight years from 1981 to 1991.
And
the
you
reason I
stuck with it.
Well, listen, here's what's interesting. You take for granted the use of the word brand today. Everybody talks about brands today. Everybody. You even brand yourself. That's a totally new concept. When American Airlines bought TWA, the New York Times said American Airlines bought the TWA brand. But in 1991, that word was not used. And I woke up one day when that was presented to me, and I said, there are only 3 brands in the entertainment business. Disney, which is amazing, National Lampoon, and Playboy. What did I mean by that? I meant by that was that you could slap that name on any media, movie, television, video game, merchandise, and people would know exactly what it was about. So if it's Disney, family entertainment. National Lampoon, adolescent humor. Playboy, porn. This is the second time we've talked about porn.
We're back to porn. Are you trying to tell us something, Jim?
Yeah. So buying National Lampoon, which seems to be different than Disney, was the same idea. I had become an expert, only because I worked at Disney, on marketing things around a powerful brand. National Lampoon was the same thing as Disney. So the concept of the National Lampoon and how you could synergize all of that so that one thing supports another and vice versa was a no-brainer. And I remember, because the first 25% of marketing is telling people what your product is. So if you put National Lampoon on the product, you don't have to spend that money. And I remember we were visiting somebody, people were trying to figure out what to do in the digital space. And there was a guy starting a sports interactive thing. And we went to see him. He said, we're going to spend $25 million on marketing this fall. I said, boy, that's a lot of money. And the guy said, well, we got to build our brand. On the way back to the office, I turned to my colleague, his name was Michael. I said, Michael, we just saved $25 million. and that summed it all up. So that's why I bought it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. I guess, are you looking then in your career, in your creative career? You said you're into numbers, you're into money, you're into business, but everything that you go down involves it's creative, it's emotionally creative, and it's passionate. It's not just running numbers and saving $25 million. You're the act of creating a brand, in my mind, is one of the most creative things you can do.
Absolutely.
because you have to define soup to nuts what it means to people.
So running a business should be and could be very creative. I think a lot of people grow up thinking creativity is art. If you're not making a painting, sing a song, do a sculpture, that's creative. Running a business is very creative. It's fun to be creative in running a business. It's a different kind of creativity. It's not fine arts, but it's true. And it goes back to, for me, it goes back to the initial inclination I had to be in the media business, right? So, going back to Penn State, when I was a senior at Penn State, all of the giants of industry came to New York to recruit, and they had these fairs. So in Pennsylvania, that was United States Steel, Alcoa Aluminum, Heinz from Pittsburgh. And that was a big deal for people. You're a senior majoring in business administration. You're going to go to this. I never went to one of those. Not one. By the way, the broadcast networks were not doing that, right? Because they didn't need to go recruit people. Everybody wanted to be in media. So I just ignored all of that because I knew what I wanted to do. And I do think, again, that singular purposefulness, to use a cliche, I never had to work a day in my life, because I'm doing exactly what I want to do.
Well, what are you making happen next then?
Well, I think I'm pretty much on the road to what I want to be. I'm hopeful over time. It's very early, and even this season, with COVID and everything, we're going full steam ahead on this season. Absolutely full steam ahead, and that's the best way to do it. And let the chips fall where they may. If something happens, if COVID hits us in a different way, we'll just have to roll with it. But we're going full steam ahead. But I am hopeful that over not time, but not too much time, we can expand what we're doing. In educational programs. Would there be a way to develop new writers? Would there be a way to develop? A lot of people are doing this, but there's always room for one more. I think we can try to. aggressive business people always want to do the next thing, right? That's the most normal. That's why government gets so big. We're always going to get back to government because people always want to do more.
I mean, what else?
Yeah. So I'm hopeful we can expand this into outreach and developing. I have strong feelings about today's music. I'm not a big fan of what's going on today. I've become essentially disenfranchised from a lot of what's going on today. And I for a while, I had trouble with that because, I want to be current. I want to be with it. I want to know all the latest and greatest. I've made my decision that I'd rather go for quality. And if I'm not quite up to everything that's going on today, it really doesn't matter because there's a lot of other good stuff out there. But I would like to do programs at our company with Rob, as we get more settled, because COVID, everything is slowed down a bit, to encourage you get back to the kind of craft I was talking about. Is there a way to get back to good writing where people really rhyme words rather than having false rhyme? That seems like a small thing, but that's a big deal to me. Cole Porter never did a false rhyme. He wouldn't rhyme world and girl. But today, nobody cares. They rhyme world and girl and think, well, that's close enough. Well, that's the craft,
Jim says it's not close enough.
No, it's not close enough. And could you get back? Could you work your way back to a quality level that we had until relatively few years ago?
Jim, I have one last question for you. We have spent the last hour talking about success after success after success. I mean, you made a decision, you set your mind on something, and you just created it all the way. What is your relationship with failure?
Failure?
I mean, was there... It seems unrealistic to think that there was never a time in anything that you did that didn't work out. We always say failure doesn't really exist. It's a learning opportunity. You try something different. But I mean, maybe you are that unicorn. I would believe that from you after the last hour together, that it never had one thing that didn't work. But yeah, with something not going as intended and then learning from it, retooling and doing something else. Your response was really funny.
I've been asked two really surprising questions in my life. Two surprising questions, and about failure was one of them. Well, I'll tell you a failure. I will tell you the two biggest mistakes we made launching the Disney Channel, and we were able to correct them. And I wear these mistakes on my sleeve proudly because the idea is you acknowledge your mistakes, you learn from your mistakes, and they were massive mistakes, but we caught them in plenty of time. The first mistake I made, because I was so proud of what we were doing, I was so excited about what we were doing, that I overestimated the price resistance of the Disney Channel. That I priced the Disney Channel at the same level of HBO. And even though people love Disney because it wasn't a full network in the sense that HBO was going to do sports, in other words, people didn't seem to be willing to pay quite as much. Our research was off on that. And how we handled that is we lowered the price. So we made a pricing mistake in those first 2 or 3 months. That didn't turn out to be a big deal, but I can tell you about that, even though it was 40 years ago. The second mistake that we made that was significant was we overestimated the age of the parents. That's
fascinating.
Were younger than we thought they were. Our research showed them to be older than they turned out to be. So people, whether they're getting married early or whatever it was. So that our nighttime programming, which was skewed to get more family and less children, was off base just a touch because we misread that demographic. Now those are two interesting mistakes. Now, if you think about the fact that we made 17 billion decisions to do this, that's okay. But they were big mistakes, and it's fun to talk about them because who among us, So those were two. The other thing, of course, was we had shows that didn't work. You know, we had more original programming on the Disney Channel in the first year than HBO and Showtime combined. Even by 1983, they were just conduits for existing movies. We had 13 new series on that channel on day one. 13.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, 13. And we had made for TV. Matter of fact, we won our first Emmy in October of 1983. We won an Emmy for the best made-for-TV movie theater within 6 months of the time we launched. It was a movie
incredible.
called Tiger Town, starring Roy Scheider, who agreed to work for Scale because he got a chance to work with the Detroit Tigers, and that's the thing. He loved it.
Smart move on his part. That worked out.
Yeah. So, but we had certain shows that didn't work. In the context of 24/7, that was okay. But I like recounting those two mistakes because it's fun. It's actually fun for me to think about those miscalculations that we made as we were doing all of our research.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing all of that because it's easy for people to hear your story and just think that you had the golden touch, which I think you probably do, but that there was never strife, that there was never difficulty. Folks listening, what we are learning from you is that you can make some pretty massive errors and still be so incredibly, wildly successful, right? These things, it's just a bump. It's just a bump and you retool it and you come back. So thank you for humoring me with that question. Your reaction, you were like, failure. I don't do that.
I don't use the F word.
And the other thing that's interesting to talk about is it's hard. It's hard. But doing the Disney Channel, running, it's hard. Even though you end up, and I remember like the frustrations you have. So TV Guide was a big deal in 1983. People still got TV Guide, and they went to TV Guide to decide what they were want to watch because there wasn't digital guides in those days. And they wouldn't put us in. We had say 500,000 subscribers, right? Which was we were on the road, and they wouldn't put us in there. And so I went down to Radnor, Pennsylvania, to meet the president of TV Guide. I said, "Look, and he said, "Look, Jim, it will take us 35 pages." To do the Disney Channel. If you look at all those programs over 7 days, that's 35 pages. That's 35 pages of paper we have to buy and all that ink. And until you get a little more, we can't afford to do it. So I still remember walking out of that meeting saying, gee. But we eventually got into TV Guide. But that's typical of we gloss up. We're having fun in this interview, kind of top line. But day by day, you're dealing with lots of things.
Yeah.
Things that are disappointing. I mean, it's disappointing to not be in TV Guide, for example. Turned out okay. So, those are some, let's say more macro realities of running any business.
I guess, on the grand scheme of what's going on.
Micro, sorry.
Yes.
Right.
On the grand scheme, so the grand scheme of what's going on, like you're not launching a satellite into space and crashing it into Jupiter. So it's not like millions of dollars you will never get back. You can course correct. And I think that's the takeaway from all of this is that especially in entertainment, in media, it's like we were saying, most people don't make it. Most people, this industry is mostly rejections and most competition. And we talk about the politics of literal politics, but also of business. And as long as you keep going and you know what your end goal is, you picture it in your mind and you just make that happen. You make it happen. You manifest it. And you are living proof.
It's amazing.
That even though your dreams happen, you can still make it better.
Yeah.
Again, Andre DeShields, I quote him all the time. The top of one mountain is the bottom of the next.
Yes.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I mean, I think that is a perfect way to close the conversation because that's you, Jim. Like you got to your dreams and you were like, now how do I dream bigger? And you just kept making it happen. It's so inspiring. Thank you so much for being here with us.
You people are delightful. We're going to see you at Theater Row this winter, maybe?
Absolutely.
This has been fun.
Thank you. It has been so much fun. We're so grateful. Yeah. Best of luck with everything else you're working on.
All the best.
Wowie, wow.
Yeah. That was crazy cool.
That was crazy cool. That is a dude that literally, God, I was going to say he's left his mark on the world in a way that so many people will never, ever realize.
Yeah.
And by creating, manifesting this reality of coming to CBS and then going to Disney and then starting this J2 communications and moving on and on. He's creating this foundation and these platforms that give others the ability to realize their dreams.
Yes.
And inspire people to have new dreams.
And his emotion behind that, how passionate he feels about seeing people pursue their own dreams and passions. It was so beautiful and maybe a little unexpected from somebody who's such a business guy and who, had the brain to create the Disney Channel, for God's sake.
What did he say? That before satellite, people were biking 16 millimeter tapes around to get content distributed? Like I didn't even know that. I had no idea.
Absolutely insane. And also scale of that, right? When he recommended it and it was, what he said, $1.99, like it was insanely cheap and they wouldn't bite. And then 5 years later, it was 19 million. And even that turned out to be peanuts. What a guy. What a fun conversation. I wasn't sure, like, if a guy like that would be into us, but he liked us. So that was good.
Was there ever any doubt? No, I enjoyed him a lot. Jim, if you're listening, thank you. Thank you for sharing your time. I know, gosh, your time is valuable. And I'm so impressed with executives like this that are still so accessible. I guess if you get an idea, right? Because everyone wants to drag you through the mud. Whether the more successful you are, the more people know about you, and therefore the more people want to bring you down. And that's an unfortunate part of life, and it's part of the rejection in the politics that we talked about. But man, this guy is just like, he had his blinders up for what he knew he needed to do in life, and just didn't stop. And I loved what he said when you asked the question about failure.
You guys could have seen his face on video.
He was like, "What?"
He just paused for a full 10 seconds.
The word didn't even compute to him, because the way he thinks about it is, it's just an opportunity to change back into it, to fix something, to put it back the way and keep going. Like, a failure isn't a stopping point; it's a learning point.
He eased into that really well, and he had clearly notable memories of times where he's like, "Oh, that was a big fuck up. We caught it. It's okay." But and he was proud to share that story because it shows the growth. But you're right. Like, failure just is not a thing that exists, and not because things don't go wrong, but because I think the concept of failure is, okay, well, we're done. That doesn't work. We're done.
Right.
And that's just failure, Jim Jimirro just doesn't play that game.
Every failure is an opportunity, not a stopping point.
Yeah. It was so good. I love this show. I love you.
I love you.
I'm so glad that we get to do this. I mean, is this the coolest thing in the entire world or what?
This is so unique and different. And listeners, we hope you think so too. Why don't you turn to that person next to you sitting on the subway or, on the commuting train right now and be like, "Hey, I'm listening to this great podcast. I think you need to listen to it too. Here you go.
Share
it.
And
here's my number. There you go.
and here's my number. And here's Drew Gasparini's email. And you can just absolutely. We would really appreciate it if you would subscribe, rate, and review the show. We want to be in a world where those things don't matter, but we're just not. They matter, and they make us feel good. They make our little tiny hearts explode a little to see your reviews. And if you can now review on Spotify, that's new.
Mm-hmm. You know what, though? Talking about marketing and branding, the word subscribe is out. That's so 2021.
Follow.
Now you follow podcasts because the majority of people who have never listened to a podcast think subscribing costs money.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, follow us.
So follow us wherever you are listening now.
Wherever you are listening. And review. Rate and review
And make sure you check out J2 Spotlight Musical Theater Company. You can get more information, read about Jim, get tickets at j2spotlightnyc.com.
Also, we know that you are out there taking intentional risk to build the creative, successful life that you want. And as this conversation with Jim Jimirro just showed us, creativity shows up all the time in every way, in everything. We are not just talking about artistry. You do not have to be a Broadway actor or a professional singer to be manifesting creative success. So we want to hear about it.
Just like Jim, let us know if you're a business owner, how are you being creative?
Yes. How are you creative and embracing chance to intentionally manifest your life? We are on Instagram at Was It Chance, and you can DM us right there and share your story. And once we've collected a few, we're going to do a standout solo episode sharing your chance encounters and stories. We want to include you.
Or email us at wasitchancepodcast@gmail.com.
You'll get a response because it's just me and Alan, yo.
For now.
Yeah, you have been listening to Was It Chance, the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking intentional risks for your creative life. Thank you for being here. I'm Heather Vickery.
And I'm Alan Seals.
We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.